Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 57th episode this week, where we'll review the Patriots' initial 53-man roster and take an early look at the season to come. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Past 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at pats300levelpod.com. So, Kevin, it was definitely an interesting camp this year and roster projections. There are definitely some positions with a lot of depth. There are some positions with not much depth, but a lot of similar guys at the bottom end of the roster, especially offensive line. So it's tough to really get a read on what this roster was really going to look like. We also know that knowing Bill Belichick, there's always some, or not always, but usually some surprise cuts. Lawyer Malloy, Dan Copen, uh, Cam Newton a couple of years ago. So, what are your initial thoughts as of what cut down day looked like and what the roster currently looks like at this point in time?
Yeah, I think looking at on specifically cut down day, there weren't too many really surprise cuts. The biggest one obviously being Zappy, of course.
Yeah.
I don't think really anyone expected that to happen where he did struggle in the preseason, he struggled throughout camp. He didn't really look really sharp or really good. Whereas we know last year what he kind of did the best in was a simplified offense. And obviously, Bill O'Brien's offense is not simple. So it's not something where you can just kind of go out there and play. You got to really think and have different reads and progressions and all that sort of stuff. And you actually looked at him during preseason when he wasn't under pressure, he held on to the ball way too long. He was very late to make his reads.
Yeah.
So it's something you struggle with. Obviously, you would expect that to happen anyway, coming from one system to the next. It's not something that was the same. So that was to be expected. We've said this the whole time. I don't think either of us are Bailey Zappi lovers.
Yeah.
And I think the whole Zappi fever was completely overblown before. And I think he's too short. I don't think he's got the arm strength for it. But again, you never know. So I think that was probably the most shocking one. Although he's back on the practice squad. So really everyone that we had expected to be basic on the team is still here. There's nothing
Yeah.
really that was too shocking. There weren't any waiver claims or anything like that. So yeah, I think overall it's pretty much what we expected. Nothing too crazy there.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't expecting too many shocking things. I think there were some interesting pieces that, like Sam Roberts, who had a really good camp, and I'm a really big fan of. I was like, is he going to make the roster considering how much depth they have on the defensive line? Especially on the interior. So things like that, I wasn't sure if it was going to project perfectly. My projections, I did it before the third preseason game where I got 46 out of 53, and that's considering some of the injuries that happened and things like that. So it really wasn't too much shocking other than Bailey Zappi being cut, but they brought him back on the practice squad. Malik Cunningham, I was a little surprised that they cut. I don't think he was really deserving of a roster spot, but because of the project, his unique ability, and teams like the Ravens, who their backup quarterback was hurt, I could see a team putting in a waiver claim on him just because of the uniqueness of him. But again, I don't think he was really deserving. If he did get claimed, it wouldn't have been the biggest thing in the world. But pretty much nothing too surprising other than Zappy, but pretty much they brought back everyone. I guess the one surprising one was trading Pierre Strong, which I didn't see that happening. I'm also a big fan of Pierre Strong, really fast guy, and I thought he could be fill the Damian Harris role, but I think that he didn't really emerge this offseason. He didn't take that next step that we typically see from second year running backs. And then also they have changed the offensive system from what they were initially planning when they drafted him last year, and it could just be that he didn't really fit the scheme they were going for. And also he did play special teams last year, but did have some coverage gaps and was one of the main reasons why they Buffalo had a kick return for a touchdown in the last game of the season. So they might feel like they don't trust him enough on special teams, and he didn't take that next step where he was just expendable.
And I think he was the in the Vikings game too, wasn't he? The punt, didn't he jump off sides?
I believe so. Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then yeah, I think the strong one, I guess, was probably more surprising, just because usually you would think the second year running backs are usually good to go with the Patriots.
Yeah.
Um, I think the other thing, just to really make note, it was on our Twitter. Assuming you follow us on Twitter again, at Pat's 300 level pod. Ben Volin put out there saying how it was how a fourth a running back drafted in the fourth round should be an immediate contributor, which is completely insane and completely wrong. So if you actually look at really how teams, and Mike Lombardi actually had a good breakdown of this back in the past. I can't remember if it was a book or his podcast, but he really, because he's been in the teams, he's been
Yeah.
with the Patriots, he's been a GM. He described really how each round kind of breaks down and what they're expecting. So a first round top 15 pick, they're expecting an immediate contributor, an immediate game changer for them. A first round pick over basically anyone in the first round should be a starter for them. Second round pick should be in between. So it could be a starter or at least a contributor, but not full time. And then after second round, you're not really expecting any major contributors first year,
Yeah.
especially out of really a running back, really in the fourth round. And then it was a good tweet that we had also retweeted. Saying the number of fourth round running backs that have actually contributed, and there's been 2 of 7 that were picked by the Patriots. So
Yep.
out of the 54, whatever it was. So,
However many years, with one of them
mhm,
being Ramondre Stevenson, which he contributed round one,
mhm,
but the previous one, James White, which he was pretty much benched his whole
mhm,
rookie year. And then Damian Harris was pretty much benched his whole rookie year. He contributed after
mhm,
that, which is why we were all thinking that, or at least me specifically, was thinking
mhm.
Pierre Strong would take that next step. But even Stephen Ridley was a third round pick. Shane Vereen was a second, but a lot of times you're not seeing major impact from a rookie running back. The only one that we really did outside of Mondre was Stephen Ridley,
Mhm.
but he was a
Lawrence
first round pick.
Maroney.
But
Lawrence Maroney was a first
yeah,
round
but
pick.
Lawrence Maroney also wasn't great either.
Yeah.
Like he didn't live up to that first round pick,
Mhm.
but Michelle at least played a lot. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And then I think the other big thing that I wanted to also address on here too was just Greg Bedard and Mike Giardi saying
yep.
how the number of players that went unclaimed by the Patriots versus other teams. So they didn't have
And
any of their
Bedard
late.
did this last year too, and I knew he was going to
Mhm.
do that because
Yeah.
he made the same exact stupid
Yeah.
thing. But
So they made the point saying that because they didn't have a single player that they waived get claimed by another team shows how little depth and how little talent they have on their roster. So there's a couple facts that go really against that and are pretty obvious. Number one, there were only 24 players overall claimed. Hardly any player gets claimed
yeah,
whatsoever. So you look at the amount
there
of
were
people.
16 teams that had a player claim. There were 16 teams that did not. So half the league did
Mhm.
not have a player claimed.
Yeah. So you look at the percentage of players that were claimed was such a minute percentage. It was less than, I think it was
Less
2
than
point
two
something
percent.
percent.
Yeah.
It is very small. Number two, um, are you really going to be missing any of the people you're claiming? No, because you're cutting them for a reason. So, and number three, isn't it actually saying that you're actually cutting the wrong person if someone's
Yep.
claiming them? Because if they're so expendable, if you're thinking they're expendable, someone else wants them and thinks that they want to put a claim in, does that mean you made the mistake in cutting them where you could have cut someone else? Because
Yep.
obviously you have 53 people you have to keep on your roster. There aren't 53 great players in the league. So by saying that the 53rd or the 54th person you cut was so good that your whole roster was talented. It's just insane, and it's just this clickbait kind of stuff that we talked about last episode that needs to end with the Boston media right now. It's so ridiculous,
Yeah.
and people need to stop listening to this and tuning them out. And that way, maybe they'll stop with all this kind of nonsense they're reporting on because it doesn't make any sense. It's not right. It's not accurate, and it's making a mockery over kind of their whole job profession. We
Yeah.
don't claim to be beat reporters or journalists or anything like that, but I honestly think that if you turn to us, we're going to give you the honest, clear cut. This is how it looks. We're not giving a kind of meandering or pandering to a certain crowd,
Yeah.
whereas they're just trying to get clicks, and that's not something we're about.
And then just one more point that kind of 100% disproves or Bedard's theory on that is the Rams, who haven't had a first round pick in 7 years and have only had 6 top 100 picks in the last 3 years, had someone claimed. but the Bengals, whose oldest player is Ted Karras, who is 30, didn't have anyone claimed, and they're one of
Mhm.
the best rosters in football. So that kind of goes complete opposite of their point, and it's something that Bedard did last year to try and stoke the fire as well because the Patriots didn't have anyone claimed. And I knew he was going to do it again this year,
Mhm.
but it's just it's despicable
Okay.
what the whole media is doing. But we talked about this last week, so we can move on.
All right. Next thing. I think we kind of talked about the depth breakdown, right?
Not really. I think one thing that kind of goes to it is with them cutting Bailey Zappi, then bringing him back on the practice squad. They did put in. We're filming right now on Thursday. They did put in a waiver claim for Matt Corral, and he's on the active roster. I don't expect him to be the number 2 this year, just because from all he pretty much missed all last year with the injury, even though he was drafted ahead of Bailey Zappi. Reports out of Carolina where they view him as a development pick. And part of the reason why they waived him was they didn't feel comfortable that he would be ready to be a backup this year in case Bryce Young wasn't ready or got hurt or something like that. And that's part of the reason why he was expendable. So I think they view him as more of a projection or a developmental backup player where they can see after this year, Bailey will be his backup this year. After this year, who do they feel comfortable going forward for the next 2 years of their contracts? Is it Bailey? Is it Matt Corral? Or do they just draft someone? So even though they did pick him up, I still think he's going to be number 3 on the depth chart.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think that's just another kind of crazy thing where you look at the draft from last year where the Patriots had traded with the Panthers. So they traded their third round pick and then received a fourth round pick and the third round pick in this year. So the third round pick in 2023.
Yep.
So they ended up with everyone from that
Yeah.
whole trade. So I think that was
Including
actually
Bailey
kind of funny,
Zappi.
including Bailey Zappi, Mapu, and
Yep.
now Corral. So I think that is kind of really kind of funny and interesting thinking of how that kind of really went around that way. But yeah, I think Corral's a really interesting kind of prospect where he's kind of different than the two quarterbacks you have right here. He's very mobile. He's quick. So can you kind of get something with him with his legs and his arm? And he's supposed to make really good decisions. He's one of the best decision making quarterbacks in that draft, supposedly.
Yeah.
I wasn't too huge on watching Ole Miss at all
Yeah,
back then,
but
but
part of the thing too with him though is he was coming from a more simplistic offense,
Mhm,
so it's going to be interesting him going to his third different offense in 3 years, also
mhm,
going from a simplistic offense, indirectly from he played under Lane Kiffin, who's indirectly in the Bill Belichick tree,
mhm.
but going to a more complex Bill O'Brien offense should be interesting as well. Maybe he's able to pick it up, but I think it's just you never know. He was a high draft pick last year. It's worth a shot in the dark. Yeah. Maybe you get something out of it. If not, you just cut ways and move on.
Yep. So I think the other thing about kind of positional depth chart breakdown, I think the biggest kind of I think we can kind of break this into just question marks. So I think we kind of talked about this last podcast, but we can kind of break on it now. This is just more injury. So I think really the kind of the two biggest question marks coming into this, or actually just one biggest question mark. I think the only question mark we have is offensive line, right?
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
anything running back? They only have two right now in the active roster. Montgomery is going to be promoted. You would
Yeah.
have to assume from the practice squad to make it three running backs. But obviously, offensive line is kind of the biggest question mark with some more injuries happening with Riley Reef. But from what kind of reports kind of make it sounds like the health is getting there with the players. So Cole Strange is back in the practice squad.
Yep.
Calvin Anderson is off the non-football injury list, which supposedly was a pretty big illness that he had,
Yeah.
which he said he wasn't going to get into, but they will at some point. But he said he didn't think he'd be able to even play again at some point. So it's good to kind of see him out there. And then Michael went back at practice. So I think the biggest kind of question mark you have, knowing that Strange is back and knowing that Owenu is back, is who's going to fill that right tackle position for the Patriots, and what is that going to look like? So the way that I would see it, and the way that kind of things that I think would make the most sense, would obviously be having Trent Brown left tackle,
Yep.
Cole Strange left guard. You have David Andrews center.
Yep.
So the big question is, what are you going to do at right guard and what are you going to do at right tackle? And I think a lot of that hedges around what is Michael Wanu's kind of football shape looking like right now?
Yep.
Because because he's coming off of injury and an ankle injury, is he going to be quick enough right now to actually play that tackle position? I don't know. I haven't been. We can't see those live practices like that, so we don't know what he's looking like.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest question mark. Where can you put? Is he in good enough shape where you throw him at right tackle and then have Mafi be the right guard, assuming that Reef ends up going on IR. Or if Reef doesn't, then put Reef at right guard. Or you could do the other one where you have a one at right guard and then put Reef at right tackle. I don't think Calvin Anderson is going to be in shape enough to play right tackle if he was that severely ill for that long. Um, but I don't know. Maybe they kept him on the illness list while he was gaining back strength and all that. So that could also
Yeah.
be possible. So um, it is going to be interesting to see. And the other kind of one tidbit, I am talking a lot here, is that a lot of people have also, a lot of football minds have said it's actually easier to protect if it's the right tackle position
Yeah.
that's weak than having the right guard, because at least you have four strong people, and that way you're only protecting on basically one thing, so you're not funneling in um, a weakness there, and that way you can have a tight end chip on the end, or you could throw another lineman in to be a tight end and chip there. So it may actually make the most sense actually right now to actually have a one new play right guard, no matter what his health status
Yeah.
is, and then put the weakest person at right tackle and play around that.
Yeah, and I think that's really some really good points. And I think the O line is by far, even just going into the offseason, it was the biggest question mark. After free agency, it was the biggest question mark. After the draft, it was the biggest question mark. And now it's still the biggest question mark. And I think some of the complexity that makes it even more so is Cole Strange and one you did get back this week. But again, they haven't practiced in a month.
Mm-hmm.
Onyu is rehabbing from surgery. So is he going to be in football shape in 12 days for when they
Mm-hmm.
play the Eagles, which I'm going to get into a second, but the Eagles have by far the best pass rush front seven in football. So it's going to be a challenge, especially
Mm-hmm.
week one with this offensive line where it is right now. But is he going to be able to be in football shape to play tackle? I know Doug Hyde was saying even though they were playing Riley Reef at guard and the expectation was maybe if Reef was at guard, maybe have a 1 year tackle, he doesn't think he's going to be in football shape to move out to tackle, especially after rehabbing from that injury. So then if that's the case, do you go, is Reef healthy to play? Do you go with Calvin Anderson? Is Calvin Anderson going to be in football shape? Is Cole Strange, even though he was all training camp, is he going to be back in football shape after missing the past month or so with injury? Uh, in a perfect world, I would probably go with maybe Mafi at right guard and a Onwenu at right tackle, just because Onwenu is just solid wherever he is. But I feel like that's not going to be the case, and it'll probably be a Onwenu and then Anderson or Reef or City So or one of the tackles that they traded for.
Yep. And I think another thing too, just to mention that I forgot, is that usually we've seen this year after year lately with the Patriots, where the first game or two, they actually like to go through the offensive line. They don't like them playing a full 100%.
Yeah,
So what is that going to look like if they're actually kind of weakened already? Are they going to look even worse the first week or two
yeah,
if they're kind of staggering through each person and not giving
yeah,
them 100% of the reps just to keep them fresh? So that will be interesting too. What is that going to look like? And then that would actually make the kind of perfect case for James Ferentz to be called up at one point, because he's
yeah,
got that guard center background there too. So
yeah. And I think one of the things that also makes it a little tricky, I know you're saying that you can kind of hide your deficit at right tackle. And I know
mhm,
Taylor Giles was talking about that too. But one of the tricky things with this offense is you don't really have blocking tight ends. Like Hunter Henry isn't
mhm,
really a good blocker. Mike Gesicki is just a giant slot receiver.
mhm,
So my guess is they'll be bringing up Matt Sokol the first 2 weeks because he was their best blocking tight end in camp. And then you'll be using a lot of Ezekiel Elliott on passing downs
mhm,
just as a blocker, and then maybe screen in the backfield after blocking.
mhm,
But it is going to be interesting to see. You have a very good pass rush with the Eagles week one. You have also a good pass rush with Miami week two, just to start the season. So you have to keep Mac healthy.
Mhm.
And then you just have really tough challenges to start the year. But it should
Yep.
be interesting to see.
Yeah, it should be pretty interesting. All right. Now we've done enough of that. Trivia. We got
Yeah.
trivia back from Eric. Let's see how good I can answer these questions.
So it's all along the same premise, but the first part, part one of the question is in the Bill Belichick era, how many running backs have run for 1,000 yards with the Patriots?
One.
Who?
Oh, actually, no. It's been more than one. It's not multiple. It's just at least once in the season.
Yep.
Oh, shit, it's not that. It's not one then. Um, Bill Belichick era. So Dylan, three.
And who are they?
Sony Michelle, Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, and Corey Dillon.
Two of those are right, but it is six.
Oh shit! Is Lawrence Maroney in there?
No. So
Stephen
it is
Ridley.
Corey Dillon in 2004, his first year, who set the franchise record.
Mm-hmm.
Then number two in the Belichick era is Stephen Ridley in 2012, fourth all
Mm-hmm.
time in Patriots single season with 1263. Number three is LeGarrette Blount, the year he had 18 touchdowns in 2016 with 1161. Number four is Antoine Smith in 2001 with 1157.
I forget about him.
Five is Mondre last year. Good job, Kevin, catching that with
Mm-hmm.
1,040. And then number six was Benjaris Green Ellis in 2010 with 1,008.
Is your next question gonna be how many multiple 1,000 yard?
Yeah.
Um, none.
Yeah.
The only person they've had was, or the last person to do it was, what's his name? The guy that got traded to the Jets or signed with the Jets.
Curtis Martin.
Chris Martin.
Yeah.
That was
Antoine Smith was actually really close. In 2002, he had 982.
I think that was
But,
a trivia question on one of the preseason games or something.
oh, interesting.
All
But
right. Anything
yeah.
else? Or is that it?
No, that's it.
All right. Alrighty. Early look at the schedule. So we're not going to really go line by line saying which game is a win, which game is a loss, because that's what idiots do. But we're gonna kind of just go by um kind of thoughts. I'll just list off what the teams they're facing. Everyone can really see this, so it'll be really quick. Eagles, Dolphins, Jets, Cowboys, Saints, Raiders, Bills, Dolphins, Commanders, Colts, Giants, Chargers, Steelers, Chiefs, Broncos, Bills, Jets. So I think the really biggest kind of takeaway here is the strength of schedule that they're facing. This is facing a lot of really good teams with really good quarterbacks is the biggest one. So obviously the Eagles, the Jets, depending on what Aaron Rodgers is looking like, the Cowboys, the Saints. I don't think you could say Derek Carr is that good. Raiders is with
I wouldn't
my
put Jimmy
man
that good.
Jimmy Garoppolo
Nah.
if he's healthy. Josh Allen with the Bills. The
Justin
what's his
Herbert
name?
with the
Justin Herbert
Chargers.
with the Chargers. Mahomes with the
Mahomes.
Chiefs. And that's it. I don't consider Russell Wilson to be good anymore.
Yeah.
I could be proven wrong. Maybe Sean Payton will get something out of him. Pickett, I still think we'll have to see some more out of him. We all know how we kind of feel about Daniel Jones. He's just kind of just the guy who's fine, but I don't think he's anything over the top. I think Richardson's going to show a lot of trouble. He's going to kind of be like he's going to throw a ton of picks probably this year.
Yeah.
And the same goes with the Commanders. How do you know what is he going to look like on the quarterback? And then neither of us are Tua fans. And
Yeah.
then that's it. Did I mention
Dak.
Jalen? Oh, Dak. I'm not a big Dak guy.
Yeah.
I think he's
He's like
basically
Tony Romo 2.0, where he
yes.
puts up numbers, but he'll never win in close
Yep.
games.
Yep. So that's there. So I think the kind of the biggest thing to really take away here is one, just the strength of schedule the quarterback's going to, but three is that again, this is probably like the third year in a row where they have that little bit of a soft landing in the middle of the schedule. So the beginning part is a little bit tricky, but they do have that part from the Commanders, the Colts, to the Giants, to the Chargers, to the Steelers. So that 5 game stretch is a little bit of a softer landing pad. And again, some people are going to say the Giants are really good. How are they going to look the same next year? They might. But I think one of the biggest things too is that Barkley hasn't really stayed healthy his whole career. So is he going to stay healthy? Last year was the first time he's been healthy in forever. So how is he going to look? And then the Chargers, the Patriots have Herbert's number, and I also think that, and you think that too. Brandon Staley's an idiot,
Yeah.
and he loses them multiple games. Um,
My
so
my
I'm not.
favorite thing of this whole, or one of my favorite things from this whole offseason, other than the Patriots bringing in Bill O'Brien, was
Mhm,
the Chargers not firing Brandon Staley. Because if they actually had a good coach, you could argue they're one of the most talented
mhm,
rosters in the
mhm.
whole NFL, or at least AFC.
Yeah.
So with Staley at the head coach, maybe they sneak in as a wild card, but they're not going far because of
Mhm. He
their
loses
coach is
them
just an idiot.
each year, 2 to 4 games a year.
Yeah.
So with his clock mismanagement, his bad decisions. So again, I don't want to get this on a Brand Staley bashing, but I do have a little of a soft landing. So with that said, knowing what we know about the schedule, what it looks like, that sort of stuff,
And
we're not getting
I'm
paid.
just going to put a couple quick points into is
Mm-hmm.
you could argue that again for the second straight year, the whole AFC as a whole has gotten better. Some of the teams, some of your competition have gotten better. You could argue most of the teams in the division have gotten better. Maybe not the Bills; they might have just stayed the same
Mm-hmm.
here or there. But Josh Allen, another year, he might take even another step at quarterback. You never know, but that's just one of the things that makes this a little tougher. The Jets, even though we both think Aaron Rodgers might be starting to decline, is he going to be worse than Zach Wilson? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
The Jets are still the Jets, in my opinion, but the Dolphins have gotten a little better. But I know both, at least me, I'm not the biggest fan of Mike McDaniel. I don't think he's that good of a coach. I think he's overrated and arrogant, and we're both not too a fan. So it depends on how that works out. They might end up being better, but I'm not optimistic about that. So that's just something we're gonna have to wait and see.
Yep. And I think the other big thing, with the Bills, like you said, they've lost some players. And then how is Josh Allen going to look year 2 removed from Brian Dable? I think that's another big question. Where last year you saw his interception numbers go up, especially towards the end of the season. Is that
The
going to
one
be
thing with that though, he
consistent?
was hurt towards the end of the season, which might have contributed to it. But
It could have, yeah, it could have been the elbow injury. But
yeah,
again, is that going to start adding up? Where we've said this a bunch of times, and we're not even Bills fans or Allen fans whatsoever. But his coaching, and this is another thing with McDermott, they need to stop him from taking the hits that he's taking. Because the more and more hits he takes, and the older and older, he's not that he's old, but eventually he's going to get hurt, and he's going to get hurt worse than just not being able to play, not worse than being having just an injury affect his arm, because he takes these unnecessary hits. So what is that going to look like? Is he going to finally change the way he plays and change his running, or is he going to keep thinking he's like this linebacker, running back, jumping and trying to do all these sorts of things to get 1 or 2 extra yards where it's not really necessary? So that'll be
and
interesting to kind of see.
that's what we saw too with Cam Newton. Still a little different style. Josh
Mm-hmm.
Allen's more of a thrower than Cam Newton, but Cam Newton by
Mm-hmm.
the age of 30 was essentially washed as a quarterback, where
Mm-hmm.
he was MVP, one of the best quarterbacks in football. We even saw it with Russell Wilson to an extent, where
Mm-hmm.
not as mobile as Cam Newton, but he was more of a running, or he was a running esque quarterback. Took
Mm-hmm.
some hits, and now was last year just a fluke in the new scheme, or is he also washed at 32, 33?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something where they did get Damian Harris, who I think is the perfect style back for their team, which I actually don't really like. That's one of the few
Mm-hmm.
additions that they made. If Harris stays healthy and can run like he did in New England, that might help them, where he doesn't have to run because he has a bona fide running back that can run in between the
Mm-hmm.
tackles. But
Big if he's healthy. I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
think he hasn't stayed healthy,
He's
so I'm
missed
not
what,
counting
15
on it.
games the last 3 years.
Yeah. All right. So going on to record prediction. So I'll go first. I'm saying 11-5.
It
I would
has to be
say
11-6. the
Oh
17
shit,
games
yeah,
now.
11-6. I'm saying I would say plus or minus one. So I'm giving myself a little bit of an out here, but in case I'm wrong. But I could see them realistically losing one more or winning one more, being fluky. I think the biggest thing because at the end of the day, you are what your record is. So that's a big Parcells take. The Patriots won 10 games when Mac was a rookie, and they had Josh McDaniels as their offense corner. They won 8 games last year
Yep.
with an idiot as well, two idiots running the offense, and we're so close to actually winning about probably three of those games. So the Vikings game, the Raiders game,
Bengals
um,
game.
the Bengals game, and even the Dolphins' first game, they could have easily won too if it wasn't for mistakes. So they were so close with morons running this offense. So having Bill O'Brien back, I think it sets the stand that you should have at least 10 wins. I do see them getting an extra win because of max progression. But I also want to see them winning I could also see them just winning 10 just because of the schedule is a little bit more difficult. So I'm saying 11-6.
I am going 12-5, and if we're doing the plus or minus, I say floor of 10-7, but I could
Mm-hmm.
see them going up to 13-4. But I'm going with 12-5, and part of the reason is yes, the AFC has gotten better. You could argue the AFC East has gotten better, but like I was saying earlier, I think Aaron Rodgers is declining. We saw that last year. Could just been the scheme he was in, the system. He could have just been getting tired and is rejuvenated in a new system. Not the biggest fan of Mike McDaniel, not the biggest fan of Tua. Um, so I think they can hold their own in the division. And then, like you said, Max rookie year, they won 10 games. You could argue they should have won at 12 or 13, where if Damian Harris didn't fumble at the 1 yard line on opening day, they win that. That's
Mm-hmm.
11. They probably should have won the Dolphins game, the last game of the year. There were some plays here or there where if the defense just made one more stop, the offense, pretty much all their losses except for one,
Mm-hmm.
the Bills loss, the defense makes one shot stop, the offense has a shot to win it at the end. They could have won the Cowboys game. So they could have easily won more than 10. Last year, they won 8. If against the Bengals, they called forward progress on Mondre's fumble, which it was, they probably win that game. The Raiders game, they don't blow it. They probably win that. The Vikings game, you got to argue even the Bills if they didn't allow the 2 kick returns for touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So they had the potential to win more. I think bringing in Bill O'Brien is going to be huge for this offense. I think Mac takes that next step, and the defense. And losing McCourty is big, but the pieces that they brought in, the 3 rookies, players just taking that next step as well. I think this defense is going to be a top 3, maybe best defense in football, and can help them win games where you might not be winning shootouts where you have to score 35 to 45 points, but you probably not going to need to do that most of the time. So with Bill O'Brien, with the pieces they have in line, they should be able to, assuming Max stays healthy and that the offensive line isn't just complete crap, which
All
I mean, it might be, but that's just what I'm going with. So 12-5.
All right, sounds good. All right, so next we're going to predict who's in the playoff picture, and we're not going to go each round saying
Yeah.
like after they get there because that gets too complicated. We have no idea how good these teams are going to be. So it actually makes it the hardest thing about Survivor leagues the first 4 weeks.
Yeah.
We're just going to do who wins. I did it basically who wins each division and then who are the 3 wildcard teams. I don't know really how you set yours up. I think that's how you did it too, but
I did mine. I can say my seedings too, along with it, but
yeah, I
I
didn't
can
get
go
that.
first if you want, but
I'll go first because that way I don't want to go after you already did seedings, but
okay.
I didn't do them because that's gets way too complicated for my brain.
Yeah.
So AFC, I've got the North is the Bengals, South is the Jaguars, East is the Bills, West is the Chiefs, and the 3 wildcard teams are the Patriots, Raiders, and Steelers. Um, Steelers, they haven't had a losing record with Tomlin. And he'll somehow get them there. I was between the Steelers and the Ravens for that last spot. I think Lamar's going to get hurt again, like he usually does. So that's why I left him off, even though they do have Huntley, who is very similar. So,
Yeah,
oh,
for me,
and
you
you can
can.
go for the AFC that way. We can kind of compare them. Then I'll go to the
Yeah.
NFC.
So my AFC, some of it similar. AFC North, I have the Bengals, and I have them as the 1 seed. The East, I have the Bills as the number 2. West I have as the Raiders, assuming Jimmy G stays healthy, which he probably won't, so that's probably a bad pick. But I have the Raiders as the number three, and then Jaguars as the South as the four seed. I have my three wild card seeds in order: Patriots as the five seed, Chiefs as the sixth, and then the Titans as the seventh. I was thinking between Titans, Chargers, potentially. I still don't think the Ravens are going to do it. I think the Steelers take a step back. You could argue maybe Dolphins or Jets maybe sneak in, but I think they're both going to take a step back this year. So, all
right. So next, NFC North, I've got the Vikings. South, I have the Saints. East, I have the Eagles. West, I have the 49ers. And the three wildcard spots, I got the Seahawks, Cowboys, and Giants.
Yeah, it's actually pretty similar for most of it. For me, NFC West, I have the 49ers as my one seed. NFC East, I have the Eagles as the two. NFC North, I have the Packers as the three. And then NFC South, I have the Buccaneers. Three wild card in order, I have the Cowboys, Vikings, and Seahawks.
So I think the only difference there, you had the Packers winning the division. I had the Vikings instead winning division, and then I don't have the Packers in. Just because the first year of Aaron Rodgers, they didn't make the playoffs and weren't great. So I think it may be the same kind of learning experience for Jordan Love. And then the next year, I think he'll be better. How far will the Patriots go? I'm saying they'll win one playoff game, and then that'll probably be it. I wouldn't be shocked if they won more if they make the playoffs, assuming they go in playing well and everyone's healthy. But I think expectations would be if they win one playoff game.
I'm the exact same way. I had them winning one, losing in the divisional round, but I wouldn't be shocked if they make it further, depending on health and if everything goes according to plan, which the last 3 years it hasn't gone according to plan. Yeah. But that's just my 2 cents.
All right. And then predict Super Bowl winner. I'm going to actually write mine down too here. That way we can go back to this in case we ever want to. So this is way too early to be predicting and very complicated. And this also goes on health. So This is my big, I'm going to give you two predictions. One's, and it's a very big if. So it's going to be the Raiders against I have to look at the NFC because they stink. Against the 49ers, and the Raiders are going to win, and Jimmy Garoppolo is going to stomp on Kyle Shanahan. That's a big if Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy, which he probably is not going to be. So if he's not healthy, it's going to be the Bengals versus the Giants.
So if Jimmy G's not healthy, the NFC team is different.
Yeah, the storyline just doesn't add up. So
okay. So I'm just going with one prediction. I'm going with Bengals over 49ers.
Okay. Alrighty. So that's it. That's all we got. So thank you everyone for listening. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Pat's 300 Level Pod. Follow our website, pats300levelpod.com, and then subscribe, rate, and review. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're there too. And then we'll have another episode next week. We'll be previewing I keep wanting to say the Dolphins because they face them every single year for the first game. I'm previewing the Eagles game. How's that going to look? I think one thing I did forget to mention, I'll say it here, but I'll say it again next week. They do get one little bit of luck where there's usually a Super Bowl hangover. I need to do some research to see what that actually turns into for the first game for the loser. But that may end up actually being the Patriots' favor. So again, we'll preview the Eagles' upcoming game. We are going to get some guests in here eventually with us. So just hang tight with that. And see you next week.